You think you know how power works? You think a badge and a gun make you untouchable? Officer Derek Salinger thought so. He thought he saw a threat in a 10-year-old girl playing in a park. He didn't see a child. He saw a suspect. He didn't see innocence. He saw defiance. But when he slammed that little girl against the hood of his cruiser, he made the single biggest mistake of his life. He didn't know that the terrified child wasn't just anyone. He didn't know that the woman storming across the grass, flanked by men in dark suits, wasn't just a mother. She was the director of the United States Secret Service. And she wasn't coming to argue. She was coming to end him. This is the story of how arrogance met absolute power. Before we dive into the fallout, ask yourself, have you ever seen someone abuse their authority and get away with it? How did it make you feel? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you believe that justice should be blind, regardless of the uniform, hit that like button right now. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story where karma finally comes calling. Now let's see exactly how Officer Salinger's world fell apart. The humidity in Oak Creek, Virginia, hung heavy in the air, the kind of sticky heat that made shirts cling to backs and tempers run short. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, a time when the manicured lawns of the Sterling Heights subdivision were usually silent, save for the hum of distant landscaping crews. Officer Derek Salinger sat in his patrol unit, the AC blasting against his face, condensing on his sunglasses. He was 6 years onto the force, a man who believed the thin blue line was the only thing holding back chaos. He had a reputation at the precinct. Some called him proactive. Others, specifically the newer guys, called him a lawsuit waiting to happen. Salinger didn't care. He had the union rep, Mike Kowalski, on speed dial and a chief who preferred to bury problems rather than fix them. He took a sip of his lukewarm coffee and scanned the park across the street. It was a private community park, resident-only signs posted every 50 feet. That's when he saw her. A young black girl, maybe 10 years old, with braided hair tied back in blue ribbons. She was wearing a yellow sundress and expensive-looking sneakers. She was flying a high-end drone, the kind that cost more than Salinger's first car. She was laughing, spinning in circles as the drone buzzed through the canopy of the old oak trees. Salinger frowned. He knew this beat. He knew the homeowners, the Hendersons, the Millers, the elderly Mrs. Gable. He didn't recognize this girl. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha," Salinger muttered into his radio. "I've got a suspicious individual in Sterling Heights Park. Possible trespassing. I'm going to investigate." "4 Alpha? Is that the private park on Elm?" Dispatch crackled back. "We haven't had any calls. I'm engaging on site. Better safe than sorry. It's been a hot spot for loitering lately." That was a lie. The only crime in Sterling Heights in the last year was a stolen Amazon package. Salinger put the cruiser in drive and rolled slowly across the street, mounting the curb slightly to block the park entrance. He wanted to make a statement. He slammed the door as he exited, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. The girl, Chloe, didn't notice him at first. She was focused on the controller, her eyes glued to the drone hovering near a bird's nest. "Hey!" Salinger barked. Chloe jumped, the controller slipping in her hands. The drone wobbled in the air. She turned wide-eyed to see a large, uniformed officer marching toward her across the grass. "I'm talking to you," Salinger said, closing the distance. "Put the toy down, now." I was just flying it," Chloe stammered. Her voice was small, trembling. She took a step back. "I said put it down," Salinger yelled, stepping into her personal space. He loomed over her, 6'2" against her 4'0" frame. "You live around here?" "Which house? What's the address?" Chloe looked around, panic setting in. My mom? She's just over the hill. She's on a call." "Uh-huh. Sure she is," Salinger sneered. He looked at the expensive drone on the grass. "Where'd you get that? That yours? Or did you pluck it off someone's porch?" "It's mine," Chloe said, tears welling up. "My dad gave it to me for my birthday."
"Stop lying to me," Salinger snapped.
He grabbed her arm. His grip was tight, fingers digging into her bicep. "You're hurting me!" Chloe shrieked, trying to pull away. Resisting? Seriously? Salinger's adrenaline spiked. In his mind, she wasn't a child anymore. She was a combatant, a threat to his authority. "You're coming with me. We're going to find out who you really are and where you stole this from." He dragged her toward the car. Chloe planted her feet, screaming for her mother. "Mom, Mommy, help!" "Shut up," Salinger growled. He reached the cruiser. He didn't open the door. Instead, frustrated by her struggling, he spun her around and slammed her chest first onto the hot hood of the Dodge Charger. The sound was sickening, a dull thud of a small body hitting metal. Chloe screamed, a high-pitched, terrifying sound that cut through the humid afternoon. Salinger pressed his forearm into her back, pinning her down. "You stay down. You don't move until I tell you to move." He reached for his cuffs. He was actually going to cuff a 10-year-old. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The voice came from the sidewalk. A neighbor, Mr. Henderson, was walking his golden retriever. He looked horrified. "Back off, citizen!" Salinger yelled, his hand moving to his taser. "This suspect is under arrest for theft and resisting." "Suspect?" Henderson shouted. "That's a little girl. Get off her." I said back off, or I will cite you for obstruction. Salinger was in the zone now, the red mist of authority clouding his judgment. He felt powerful. He felt righteous. He didn't notice the black Suburban idling silently at the crest of the hill, 300 yards away. He didn't notice the rear door fly open before the vehicle even came to a complete stop. Director Evelyn Graves was having the first quiet moment she'd had in 6 months. As the newly appointed director of the Secret Service and the first woman to hold the post, her life was a series of briefings, threat assessments, and Oval Office meetings. She had taken the afternoon off, a rarity, to bring Chloe to this park, a spot vetted by her detail as secure and low risk. She was on a secure line with the Secretary of Homeland Security, pacing near the tree line, watching Chloe from a distance. Her detail, 2 agents named Miller and Vasquez, were in the Suburban, keeping a low profile so Chloe could feel normal for once. Then she heard the scream. Evelyn turned just in. Time to see the uniform slammer daughter onto the hood of the police car. The phone dropped from her hand. "Miller, move now!" She screamed into her wrist mic, though she didn't need to. The Suburban's tires were already screeching against the asphalt. Evelyn didn't wait for the car. She broke into a sprint, her heels sinking into the grass, kicking them off as she ran. She wasn't the director now. She was a mother, and her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Back at the cruiser, Salinger was struggling to get the cuffs on Chloe's small wrists. "Stop squirming." "Let her go." Salinger looked up to see a woman charging at him. She was wearing a navy blue power suit, barefoot, her face twisted in a mask of pure fury. "Ma'am, stay back," Salinger shouted, raising a hand. "Police business." "Get your hands off my daughter." Evelyn didn't stop. She collided with Salinger, shoving him with a strength that surprised him. Salinger stumbled back, releasing Chloe. The girl scrambled off the hood, sobbing, and buried her face in Evelyn's waist. Evelyn wrapped one arm around her child, her other hand pointing a finger at Salinger like a loaded weapon. "You touched her," Evelyn hissed, her voice trembling with a deadly calm. "You slammed her." Salinger regained his balance, his hand going to his baton. "Assaulting an officer? You serious, lady? You're both going in. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "You have no idea what you've just done," Evelyn said. She wasn't shouting anymore. Her voice had dropped an octave, turning into the cold steel tone she used when briefing the President on nuclear threats. I know exactly what I'm doing, Salinger smirked, pulling his cuffs back out. I'm arresting a thief. And her crazy mother who thinks she can assault a police officer. Turn around, now. Officer! A deep voice boomed from behind him. Salinger spun around. Two men stood there. They were massive. They wore identical black suits, earpieces, and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Their jackets were unbuttoned, revealing the distinct bulge of sidearms, and badges clipped to their belts. But these weren't local detective badges. They were gold stars. Agent Miller stepped forward, his movements fluid and predatory. Step away from the director immediately. Salinger blinked. Director? Director of what? The PTA? He laughed, a nervous hacking sound. Look, buddy, I don't know who you private security rent-a-cops think you are, but I'm Oak Creek PD. I have jurisdiction here. Not anymore, Agent Vasquez said, stepping to the other side, effectively flanking Salinger. Evelyn smoothed Chloe's hair, checking her cheek where it had hit the hood. It was bruising already, a red mark on her dark skin. Evelyn's eyes flashed. She looked up at Salinger. Agent Miller? Evelyn said softly. Yes, ma'am. Secure this individual. He is a threat to a protected person. With pleasure. Salinger's eyes went wide. Secure me. You can't touch me.
I'm a sworn officer of the law.
I have qualified immunity. Miller didn't hesitate. He moved with a speed that Salinger couldn't track. One moment, Salinger was reaching for his radio. The next, his arm was twisted behind his back in a Kimura lock, and he was face first in the grass. The same grass he had dragged Chloe across moments earlier. You are detained under Title 18, Section 3056 of the United States Code. Miller stated flatly, his knee pressing into Salinger's back. Get off me! Salinger screamed, spitting dirt. This is kidnapping! Dispatch, officer down. I need backup at Sterling Park. Heavily armed suspects. Evelyn walked over to where Salinger lay pinned. She crouched down, her face inches from his. Officer, she whispered, my name is Director Evelyn Graves. I run the United States Secret Service, and you just assaulted my daughter. Salinger's blood ran cold. The radio on his shoulder crackled. 4 Alpha, backup is en route. Sergeant Kowalski is 2 minutes out. Salinger grasped at that straw. Kowalski, the union rep, the fixer. Kowalski would fix this. He always did. You're dead, Salinger spat out, trying to sound tough but failing. My sergeant is coming. You feds think you own the world. You're on Oak Creek soil. You're going to jail. Evelyn stood up, brushing a speck of dust from her suit. She looked at Miller. Let him up. Let's wait for his sergeant. I want to see how deep this rot goes. Miller hauled Salinger to his feet but kept a grip on his wrist that felt like a vice. Salinger panted, his uniform grass-stained, his sunglasses crushed. He looked at the woman, then at the agents, then at the crying girl. He was scared, but his pride was louder. They can't do this, he told himself. I followed protocol. She was suspicious. I have the badge. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not one, but 3 cruisers were tearing down the boulevard toward them. Here comes the cavalry, Salinger sneered. Evelyn pulled her phone out. She didn't dial 911. She dialed a number that started with 292, Washington, D.C. area code. Get me the governor of Virginia, she said into the phone, and get the Attorney General on the line. Now. The look on Salinger's face shifted from arrogance to confusion. He was about to learn that there are levels to the game, and he was playing in the wrong league. The arrival of the Oak Creek PD was a spectacle of noise and lights. 3 cruisers skidded to a halt, blocking the road. Doors flew open and 6 officers emerged, guns drawn, using their doors for cover. Drop the weapons. Hands in the air. A voice boomed over a PA system. Agent Miller didn't flinch. He didn't drop his weapon because he hadn't drawn it yet. He didn't need to. He simply held up his badge, the gold star catching the sunlight. Federal agents, Stand down, Miller barked, his voice projecting with the authority of a drill sergeant. Sergeant Mike Kowalski, a thick-necked man with a buzz cut and a mustache that had seen better days, emerged from the lead cruiser. He holstered his weapon but kept his hand on it. He swaggered toward the group, sizing up the situation. He saw Salinger, dusty and red-faced, the crying child, and the woman in the suit. "Derek, what the hell is going on?" Kowalski asked, ignoring the agents and addressing his subordinate. "Sarge, these lunatics jumped me," Salinger yelled, pointing at Miller. "I was effecting an arrest on a juvenile suspect for theft and resisting. The mother attacked me, and then these private security goons assaulted me." Kowalski turned his gaze to Evelyn. He gave her a once-over, dismissing her status immediately. To him, she was just an angry mother in a suit. "Is that true, ma'am?" Kowalski asked, his tone condescending. "You assaulted an officer?" "Your officer," Evelyn said, her voice icy, "assaulted a 10-year-old child. He slammed her against a vehicle without cause. He used excessive force? That's a matter for internal investigation," Kowalski said dismissively. "Right now I have an officer claiming assault. I'm going to need to see some ID from all of you. And you two," he pointed at Miller and Vasquez. "Hands where I can see them. You're disarming now." Vasquez laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "That's not happening, Sergeant." "I gave you a direct order," Kowalski shouted, stepping closer. "This is my crime scene." "It's not a crime scene," Evelyn interjected. "It's a federal incident." She reached into her blazer pocket. "Don't move," Kowalski yelled, his hand tightening on his gun. Evelyn moved slowly, deliberately. She pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The badge inside wasn't the small shield of a street cop. It was the heavy, intricate crest of the Secret Service, accompanied by an ID card with a high-level security clearance stripe. "Director Evelyn Graves," she stated. "United States Secret Service. These men are my protective detail, and you are dangerously close to ending your career, Sergeant." Kowalski squinted at the badge. He paused. The gears in his head were turning slowly. Secret Service Director. He looked back at Salinger. "Derek, did you know who she was?" "She didn't identify herself." Salinger lied. "She just attacked me." "And even if she is a Fed, that doesn't give her the right to obstruct local law enforcement." "The kid stole a drone." "It's my drone," Chloe yelled from behind her mother's legs. Kowalski had a choice. He could de-escalate, apologize, and back away. But Kowalski was old school. He believed the badge was a brotherhood. You protect your own, no matter what. If he let these feds walk all over Salinger, he looked weak. "Director or not," Kowalski grunted, puffing out his chest. You're in Oak Creek. We have procedures. I'm going to have to ask you to come down to the station to sort this out. And the kid stays here in protective custody until we verify ownership of that drone." Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. "You want to take my daughter into custody?" "Procedure, ma'am." Kowalski smiled, a smug, tight-lipped smile. "Until we clear up the theft." Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, the sadness was gone, replaced by total war. "Agent Miller," she said. "Ma'am?" "Initiate Protocol 0. Miller tapped his earpiece. "Command, we have a hostile local law enforcement situation. Requesting immediate tactical support. Local PD is attempting to detain a protectee. I repeat, local PD is hostile." Kowalski laughed. "Tactical support? Who you gonna call?" "The Avengers. By the time anyone gets here from D.C., you'll be in a holding cell." "You really should watch the news, Sergeant," Evelyn said quietly. "The president is in town for a fundraiser. His motorcade is 10 minutes away. And where the president goes—" A low rumble began to vibrate the ground. It wasn't thunder. "What is that?" Salinger asked, looking at the sky. From over the tree line, a shadow swept across the park. The unmistakable thwop-thwop-thwop of rotors filled the air. A massive black helicopter, a U.S. Customs and Border Protection black Hawk that had been on standby for the president's visit, banked sharply over the subdivision. At the same time, the end of the street exploded with blue and red lights, but not the local police cruisers. These were black SUVs with strobe lights in the grills. The Virginia State Police, realizing the gravity of a hostile local PD call involving the Secret Service director, were swarming. "You were saying about a holding cell?" Evelyn asked Kowalski. The sergeant's face went pale. Salinger looked like he was about to vomit. I think there's been a misunderstanding," Kowalski stammered, taking a step back. "No." Evelyn stepped forward, forcing him to retreat. "The misunderstanding was when your officer hurt my child. Now we have clarity." The Black Hawk hovered low, kicking up a storm of dust and leaves, blowing Salinger's hat right off his head. "This is just the beginning," Evelyn promised. The quiet subdivision of Sterling Heights had been transformed into a militarized zone. The state police SUVs formed a perimeter, pushing the local Oak Creek cruisers to the fringes. The Black Hawk helicopter had landed in the center of the park's soccer field, its rotors slowly spinning down, casting long, rhythmic shadows over the scene. Officer Derek Salinger sat in the back of his own patrol car, but not in the driver's seat. He was in the back, behind the cage, the door locked from the outside. He wasn't under arrest. Not officially, not yet, but he was secured while the jurisdictional nightmare was sorted out. His hands were shaking violently. He stared at the body camera affixed to his chest. The little red light was blinking. It was still recording. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his shock. He had captured everything. The initial stop, the aggression, the slam, the screaming child, and worst of all, his own arrogant commentary to the director of the Secret Service. If that footage saw the light of day, he wasn't just fired. He was prison-bound. He looked out the window. Sergeant Kowalski was arguing with a state trooper near the hood of the car. The feds were occupied with Evelyn Graves, who was kneeling by the ambulance where an EMT was checking Chloe's ribs. Now was the time. Salinger fumbled with the device. His fingers were slippery with sweat. He knew the model, a standard Axon Body 3. It had a buffer, but once it was docked, it uploaded to the cloud. He couldn't let it reach a dock. He pressed the power button, holding it down, trying to force a hard reset. The light turned solid green, then off, but that wasn't enough. The data was on the internal storage. He looked around desperately. No one was watching him directly. He unclipped the camera from his uniform. With a grunt of effort, he jammed the corner of the camera into the gap between the seat and the door panel. Trying to crack the casing, he needed to destroy the chip. "Derek, what are you doing?" Salinger froze. Sergeant Kowalski had opened the rear door. He blocked the view of the state troopers with his wide back. I need to get rid of it, Sarge," Salinger whispered, his eyes wide and pleading. "The footage. It's bad. It's really bad." Kowalski stared at him. For a moment, Salinger saw the calculation in the older man's eyes. Kowalski was the union rep. His job was to protect the officers, to muddy the waters, to make problems disappear. But this was a Category 5 hurricane. "Give it to me," Kowalski hissed. "What?" "Give it to me." Kowalski snatched the camera from Salinger's hand. "If they find you smashing it, that's destruction of evidence. That's a felony on top of assault. You're already drowning. Don't tie an anchor to your feet. Mike, you gotta help me." She came out of nowhere. She didn't look like a director. "Shut up," Kowalski snapped. He quickly clipped the camera to his own belt, hiding it under his radio pouch. "I'll handle the chain of custody. I'll see if the file can get corrupted during the upload. But you keep your mouth shut. You followed protocol." She was aggressive. "That's the line. Before Salinger could answer, a black sedan tore up the street, bypassing the roadblocks. The Oak Creek police chief, Thomas O'Malley, stepped out. He was a politician in a uniform, a man who spent more time at Rotary Club dinners than on the street. He looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He made a beeline for Director Graves. Evelyn stood up as he approached. She was taller than him in her posture, despite being barefoot in the grass. Her suit was wrinkled, her hair windblown, but her eyes were nuclear. "Director Graves," Chief O'Malley began, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "I am Chief O'Malley. I just got off the phone with the governor. I want to personally apologize for this terrible misunderstanding. My officer—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Evelyn cut him off. Her voice was devoid of emotion, which made it terrifying. "And he isn't just your officer anymore. He's my suspect. Director, please, we can handle this internally. We have a robust internal affairs division. I assure you, Officer Salinger will be placed on administrative leave pending—" "Administrative leave?" Evelyn laughed, a harsh sound. "A paid vacation? No, I want him arrested today, right now. Assault on a federal official. Assault on a minor. Deprivation of rights under color of law. We can't just arrest him without an investigation." O'Malley protested, sweating. "The union will have my head. We need due process." "You want due process?" Evelyn stepped closer, invading the chief's personal space. "My daughter has a contusion on her chest wall."
She is 10.
She was flying a toy. Your man treated her like a felon because he didn't like the way she looked. If you don't arrest him, the FBI will. And if the FBI has to do your job for you, Chief, I will make it my personal mission to ensure they investigate every single arrest, every ticket, and every use of force report your department has filed in the last decade. I will turn this department inside out until I find the rot that created Derek Salinger." O'Malley turned pale. He knew what a federal consent decree looked like. It was the death of a department's autonomy. It was the end of his career. He looked at the state troopers, then at the FBI agents who were just pulling up in unmarked sedans. The tide had turned. The thin blue line had just been outflanked by the thick black line of the federal government. O'Malley turned to Kowalski. "Sergeant," the chief said. Kowalski looked hopeful. "Uncuff Officer Salinger from the protective hold," O'Malley said. Salinger let out a breath of relief. "They're letting me go." "And then," O'Malley continued, his voice shaking, "RICO him. Place him under arrest for aggravated assault and child endangerment. Book him." "Chief, you can't be serious," Kowalski shouted. "The union." "The union isn't here, Mike," O'Malley roared, losing his composure. "The United States government is here. Book him now, or you can join him in the cell." Kowalski froze. He looked at Salinger, then at the chief. Self-preservation kicked in. He walked back to the cruiser, opened the door, and hauled Salinger out. "Sarge?" Salinger asked, confused. "We leaving?" "Turn around, Derek," Kowalski said quietly. "What?" "Turn around." Kowalski spun him, jamming Salinger's own handcuffs onto his wrists. "Derek Salinger, you are under arrest." As Salinger was read his rights by his own sergeant, he looked across the park. He saw Evelyn Graves holding her daughter's hand. Chloe was looking at him not with fear anymore, but with pity. Salinger was shoved into the back of a state police vehicle this time. As the door slammed, he remembered the camera on Kowalski's belt. The evidence. He locked eyes with Kowalski through the glass. Kowalski tapped his belt subtly, a silent promise. "I've got the camera. I'll kill the footage." It was the only hope Salinger had left. The interrogation. Room at the FBI Washington Field. Office was nothing like the one at the Oak Creek station. It was soundproofed, sterile, and freezing cold. The table was bolted to the floor. The mirror was one way, but Salinger knew who was behind it. He had been sitting there for 3 hours. No water, no phone call, just silence. He had expected a local lawyer, maybe the union attorney. But when the door finally opened, it wasn't a lawyer who walked in. It was Special Agent Richard Harrow of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Harrow was a legend in law enforcement circles. He was the man who had dismantled the corrupt task force in Baltimore. He was known as the Shark because he never stopped moving, and he never let go once he bit down. Harrow dropped a thick file onto the metal table. The thud echoed in the small room. He didn't sit. He just stood there adjusting his cufflinks, staring at Salinger with a look of utter boredom. You know, Harrow started, his voice conversational. I was supposed to be at my niece's recital tonight. Ballet. The Nutcracker. Instead, I'm here looking at a grown man who likes to beat up little girls. I didn't beat her up, Salinger said automatically. I used necessary force to detain a non-compliant suspect. Suspect? Harrow repeated, tasting the word like sour milk. Right. Harrow pulled a chair out and sat down. He opened the file. So, Derek, can I call you Derek? You're in a lot of trouble. Derek, we're looking at Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. That carries a 10-year maximum. But since the victim suffered bodily injury, the bruising on her chest is quite nasty, that bumps it up. And since the victim is a federal protectee, well, let's just say you might want to get comfortable with the idea of federal prison. The food is terrible and the inmates don't like cops. I want my union rep, Salinger said, his voice trembling. I want Kowalski. Harrow smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Sergeant Kowalski? The loyal soldier. Harrow tapped a remote control in his hand. A TV screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a video feed from the interrogation room next door. In it, Sergeant Mike Kowalski was sitting across from another agent. Kowalski looked sweaty, disheveled, and very, very talkative. Turn up the volume, Harrow said. On the screen, Kowalski was speaking fast. Look, I told him to calm down. Salinger has always been a hothead. I've written him up twice for aggression, but the chief made me bury it. I didn't touch the girl. I just showed up after. This is on him. I'm not going down for his mistake. Salinger felt the blood drain from his face. That lying... Wait, it gets better, Harrow said. On the screen, the agent asked Kowalski about the body camera. Kowalski hesitated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the black square device. He gave this to me. He asked me to delete it to corrupt the file. But I'm an honest cop.
I wouldn't do that.
Here it is, evidence intact. Salinger slammed his fist on the table. He told me to give it to him. He said he would fix it. Harrow paused the video. See, Derek, that's the thing about the blue wall of silence. It holds up fine against civilians. But when the feds start handing out indictments, when pensions are on the line, bricks start falling out. Kowalski just traded your freedom for his immunity on the obstruction charge. Salinger slumped in his chair. He was alone, truly alone. Now, Harrow said, leaning forward, we have the footage. We've watched it. It's compelling. You call a 10-year-old a liar. You scream at her. You throw her. It completely contradicts your police report where you claimed she lunged at you. Harrow slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a plea deal. But we want more, Derek. We know this wasn't just a bad day. We've been digging into your history. We found a pattern. Traffic stops where the body cam malfunctioned. Resisting arrest charges against minorities that were dropped due to lack of evidence. We think you've been doing this a long time. Salinger choked up. I just wanted to keep the neighborhood safe. From a fourth grader? Harrow snapped, his voice suddenly loud, cracking like a whip. Don't insult my intelligence. You saw a black child in a rich neighborhood, and you decided she didn't belong. That is the definition of bias, and now you're going to pay for it. The door opened again. Evelyn Graves walked in. She had changed out of her suit into jeans and a sweater, but she looked even more imposing. She didn't look at Harrow. She looked straight at Salinger. My daughter asked about you, Evelyn said softly. Salinger couldn't meet her eyes. He looked at the floor. She asked if you were a bad man, Evelyn continued. I told her no. I told her you were a weak man, a man who borrowed power because he didn't have any of his own. She placed a photo on the table. It was a picture of Chloe's back, showing the dark bruise forming along her spine. You marked my child, Evelyn said. Now the law's going to mark you. She turned to Harrow. Director Ray and the Attorney General are briefed. They are holding a press conference in an hour. We are making an example of this department. I want federal oversight on Oak Creek PD by Monday. Understood, Director, Harrow said. Evelyn leaned down to Salinger's ear. You thought you were the law, officer. But you forgot the most important rule of the jungle. Never attack the cub when the lioness is watching. She turned and walked out, leaving the door open just enough for Salinger to hear the bustle of the busy office outside, the sound of freedom continuing without him. Harrow picked up the pen and tapped it on the plea deal. So Derek, you can sign this and give us everything on Chief O'Malley and the culture of your department, and maybe you see daylight in 8 years, or we go to trial. And with that video, and the director of the Secret Service testifying against you, you'll die in prison. Salinger looked at the pen. He looked at the screen where Kowalski was still spilling his guts. He looked at the photo of the bruise. He picked up the pen. His hand shook, but he signed. The arrogant cop who slammed the door on a child was gone. In his place was federal inmate 49021. But the story wasn't over. The karma that Salinger faced was just the first domino. The video was about to leak. And when the internet got hold of it, the fire would burn far hotter than any courtroom. If Derek Salinger thought the interrogation room was hell, he wasn't prepared for the purgatory that awaited him outside. Even before the trial began, the blue wall didn't just crack. It shattered under the weight of the digital age. 3 days after the arrest, the body cam footage, the same footage Sergeant Kowalski had sworn to delete, was anonymously leaked to a prominent D.C. investigative journalist. It hit the internet at 8 a.m. on a Monday. By 8:15 a.m., it was trending globally. The video was damning. The audio was crisp. The world watched in high definition as a terrified 10-year-old girl pleaded for her mother, only to be slammed onto a hood by a sneering officer. They heard the crack of her small body hitting the metal. They heard the arrogance in Salinger's voice as he dismissed the neighbors. And then the climax, the arrival of Evelyn Graves and the sudden, terrified shift in Salinger's demeanor when he realized he had bullied the wrong family. The reaction was nuclear. Protesters swarmed the Oak Creek police precinct. It wasn't just locals. People drove in from 3 states away. They held signs with Chloe's face and slogans like, "Who protects us from you?" and "Badges don't grant kingship." Inside the Salinger household, the silence was deafening. Derek was out on bail, a massive bond posted by his parents, who had mortgaged their retirement home to free him. He sat in his living room with the curtains drawn, watching the news. Every channel was dissecting his life. They had interviewed his high school classmates, his ex-girlfriends, and people he had arrested years ago. He was always a bully, one former classmate told a reporter. He liked having power over people. His phone had been ringing non-stop for 48 hours until he finally disconnected it. But the isolation wasn't total. His wife, Brenda, walked into the living room. She was holding a suitcase. Derek looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. "Babe, where are you going?" Brenda didn't look at him. She placed her wedding ring on the coffee table. The click of the metal on glass sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I can't do this, Derek," she said, her voice hollow. "I saw the video." "Everyone saw the video." "My boss called me this morning and told me not to come in. The neighbors. They stare at me when I get the mail. I can't be the wife of the monster cop." "I'm not a monster," Derek pleaded, standing up. "I made a mistake." It was a high-pressure situation. "She was 10, Derek." Brenda screamed, finally looking at him, tears streaming down her face. "She was a little girl with a toy."
And you hurt her!
You hurt a child. If we had kids, would you have done that to ours? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked out the door, and for the first time in his life, Derek Salinger realized that the badge hadn't given him everything. It had cost him everything. Meanwhile, the purge at the Oak Creek Police Department was swift and brutal. The Department of Justice didn't wait. They descended on the precinct like locusts. Every file was pulled. Every computer was imaged. Chief O'Malley tried to retire to save his pension. The city council rejected his resignation and fired him for cause in a televised emergency meeting. Sergeant Kowalski, despite his cooperation, was stripped of his rank and fired for his initial attempt to cover up the evidence. He was lucky to avoid prison time, escaping with probation only because his testimony against Salinger was crucial. The tough-on-crime culture of Oak Creek was being dismantled brick by brick, all because one officer decided a black child didn't belong in a nice neighborhood. 6 months had passed since the incident at Sterling Heights Park. But for Derek Salinger, time had become a blur of legal motions, bad headlines, and the suffocating walls of a safe house. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. The federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, was a fortress of stone and glass. Today, besieged by a sea of humanity, it was the most anticipated legal event of the year, a collision of law, enforcement privilege, and federal accountability. Outside, the humid air was thick with the chants of protesters. They stood shoulder to shoulder, holding signs that read, "Justice for Chloe," and "No badge is above the law." On the opposite side, a smaller, quieter group held back the blue banners, though their numbers had dwindled significantly since the body cam footage leaked. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was electric, vibrating with a tension that made it hard to breathe. The air conditioning hummed, fighting a losing battle against the body heat of the packed gallery. Every seat was filled. Reporters from every major network sat with sketchpads ready, their eyes darting between the prosecution and the defense. Derek Salinger sat at the defendant's table, a ghost of the man he used to be. The arrogance that had fueled him that day in the park was gone, replaced by a hollow, sunken look. He had lost 30 pounds. His suit, purchased for the trial, hung loosely on his frame, making him look like a child playing dress-up, a bitter irony given his crime. Next to him sat Sarah Jenkins, his high-priced defense attorney. She had been hired using funds from a massive crowdfunding campaign, a last-ditch effort by his supporters to paint him as a victim of cancel culture. Jenkins had fought tooth and nail over the past 2 weeks. She had tried every trick in the book. She argued that the drone was a potential surveillance threat to the neighborhood. She argued that Salinger had PTSD from the job. She even tried to claim that Director Graves had used her political influence to weaponize the justice system against a simple beat cop. But the jury, a diverse group of 12 men and women, had seen the video. They had seen the sneer. They had heard the fear in a child's voice. The door to the jury room opened. The murmuring in the gallery died instantly. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Henry Stanton entered the room. Stanton was a legend on the bench, a man known for his intellect and his absolute refusal to tolerate theatrics. He adjusted his robes and looked out over the courtroom, his gaze lingering for a moment on the terrified former officer. "Be seated," Stanton said, his voice gravelly and calm. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury foreperson, a middle-aged schoolteacher, stood up. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held the verdict form. "We have, Your Honor." Salinger closed his eyes. Under the table his hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "Please," he prayed, "just give me a chance. I'm a cop. I'm one of the good guys." "In the matter of the United States versus Derek Salinger," the foreperson read, her voice clear and cutting. "On count 1, deprivation of rights under all Color of law resulting in bodily injury. We find the defendant guilty. A gasp rippled through the room. Salinger felt like he had been punched in the gut. On count 2, assault on a federal protectee, we find the defendant guilty. On count 3, false imprisonment of a minor, we find the defendant guilty. 3 strikes. Salinger's head dropped. Behind him he heard his mother stifle a sob. It was a sound of pure heartbreak, the sound of a woman realizing her son was gone. Judge Stanton thanked the jury and dismissed them. Then he turned his attention to the defense table. The room was silent now, the weight of the verdict settling like lead. "Mr. Salinger," Judge Stanton said, peering over the rim of his spectacles, "we will proceed to sentencing immediately. Do you have anything you wish to say to this court, or to the victims, before I pass judgment?" Slowly, painfully, Salinger stood up. He turned slightly, looking back at the gallery. He saw his parents clutching each other. He saw the empty space where his wife, Brenda, should have been. She hadn't come. She hadn't answered his calls in months. Then he forced himself to look at the front row. Director Evelyn Graves sat there, motionless. She wore a slate-gray suit, her posture rigid. Next to her was Chloe. The girl looked taller, her hair braided differently. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hiding behind her mother anymore. She was watching him with a gaze that was unnervingly steady. Salinger's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I just want to say I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't know who she was. If I had known—" He trailed off, realizing too late the mistake he had made. Judge Stanton's face hardened into stone. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "That," the judge interrupted, his voice booming off the mahogany walls, "is exactly the problem, Mr. Salinger." Stanton leaned forward, his eyes boring into Salinger's soul. "You are sorry because of who she was. You are sorry because her mother had the power to destroy you. You are sorry because you got caught." The judge picked up a piece of paper from his desk. The victim impact statement. "You slammed a 10-year-old child against a car because you decided she didn't belong in your neighborhood. You saw her skin color. You saw her joy, and you decided it was suspicious. If she had been the daughter of a cashier or a nurse or a mechanic, we wouldn't be here, would we? You would have filed your false report, charged her with a juvenile crime, and gone home to sleep soundly while her life was ruined." Salinger flinched with every word. "We entrust police officers with lethal weapons and extraordinary authority," Stanton continued, his voice rising with righteous anger. "In exchange, we demand discipline, judgment, and humanity. You showed none of these. You betrayed the badge. You betrayed the public trust. And you traumatize a child to feed your own ego." Judge Stanton picked up his gavel. The wood felt heavy in his hand. "Derek Salinger, for the crimes you have committed, and for the callous malice you displayed, I sentence you to the maximum penalty allowed under the guidelines. You are sentenced to 180 months, 15 years in federal prison. This sentence is to be served immediately. There will be no possibility of parole." Wham! The gavel struck the sound block. The noise was final, like a coffin lid slamming shut. Salinger's knees buckled. He grabbed the table to keep from collapsing. His mother let out a wail that pierced the courtroom. A raw animalistic sound of grief. The U.S. Marshals didn't wait. They moved in with practiced efficiency. "Hands behind your back," one of them ordered. Salinger felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto his wrists. These weren't the friendly cuffs of a colleague joking in the locker room. These were the chains of the penal system. He was no longer Officer Salinger. He was Federal Inmate 49021, as they led him away, shuffling toward the side door. Salinger looked back one last time. Evelyn Graves stood up. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded at him, a single sharp motion. Justice is done. It has been 2 years since the gavel fell in Alexandria. The world moved on, as it always does. But for Derek Salinger, time stopped. He is currently incarcerated at FCI Cumberland, a medium-security federal prison. The hierarchy of prison is unkind to former law enforcement officers. For his own safety, Salinger spends much of his time in administrative segregation. When he is allowed to work, he is assigned to the laundry detail. For 8 hours a day, he feeds gray uniforms into massive, roaring industrial washers. The steam burns his hands. The noise gives him headaches. He earns 12 cents an hour. He has filed 2 appeals. Both were summarily denied by the appellate court. His legal funds are gone. His parents, unable to bear the shame and the financial ruin of his defense, sold their home in Oak Creek and moved to a small apartment 2 states away. They visit him once a month, but they have little to say. His wife Brenda never visited. The divorce papers were served to him in his cell 3 months into his sentence. She has since remarried and moved to the West Coast, erasing every trace of her life with him. The city of Oak Creek was not spared either. The Department of Justice investigation triggered by Director Graves revealed a deep systemic rot within the police department. The corruption was so entrenched that the city council voted to dissolve the department entirely. Today, the streets are patrolled by the county sheriff's office, operating under strict federal oversight. The park where it all happened has changed too. The resident-only signs that Salinger used as his excuse were torn down. In their place stands a welcoming archway that reads, "Sterling Community Park open to all." And as for Chloe, the trauma of that day didn't break her. It forged her. With her mother's unwavering support and therapy, she turned her fear into focus. She didn't stop flying. In fact, she flew higher. Chloe launched a YouTube channel dedicated to drone technology and engineering. Her charisma and expertise quickly garnered a following. Today, she has over 2 million subscribers, but she didn't stop at reviews. Last month, a now 12-year-old, Chloe stood in the rose garden of the White House. She wasn't there as a victim or a prop. She was there as an innovator. Wearing a sharp blazer and her signature sneakers, she demonstrated a new search and rescue drone she had helped design. A drone specifically built to find lost hikers in dense forests using thermal imaging. "I wanted to build something that helps people," she told the press pool, her voice steady and confident, "because technology should be used to save lives, not scare them." Watching from the wings was Evelyn Graves. She remains the director of the Secret Service, a titan in Washington. But when she sits in her office late at night, reviewing threat assessments and intelligence reports, she often looks at a small silver frame on her desk. It isn't a photo of the president. It isn't a picture of her swearing-in ceremony. It is a candid photo of Chloe smiling broadly, holding a yellow drone up to the sky in a park that is finally free. It serves as a silent reminder to every agent who walks into her office, and a warning to anyone who thinks a badge grants them impunity. True power isn't about the authority you wield or the fear you can instill. True power is the courage to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And for those who forget that, karma is always watching, waiting for the moment to strike.